So now that Loki episode 3 has come out now, I feel like enough has happened for me to make a video talking about my thoughts on the show overall. Obviously, we're going to get into spoilers and stuff, so just keep that in mind if you haven't seen the latest episode of the show. You know, like the show for the most part, it's what you expect from your typical Marvel projects. It's got like those super intense moments, but obviously you have typical like quippy characters that are like, oh, isn't that funny? That guy just flew out the window and absolutely 100% died. Like, it's still very much, you know, Marvel. But this show is slowly changing the MCU, like, forever in terms of what is possible. Because for the most part, everything has been sort of straightforward. You know what I mean? It's had a linear story for pretty much like 22 movies now. But with Loki, we're getting into time bending, multiverse, other reality type stuff. And we kind of sort of touched on that in Avengers Endgame, but this show is like really going into that stuff. So that's the one thing I absolutely love about this show, is that it's unlike any other Marvel thing that they've made. Like, try to compare this really to any other thing in terms of like what actually it involves. Tonally, it kind of reminds me of Ragnarok, where you have Thor sort of like plucked out of his comfort zone, brought into Sakaar, which is like this weird world where time moves differently. And I feel like it's sort of that situation with Loki now. And I sort of thought it was genius the way they took this new Loki, who didn't go through all the character progression that the previous Loki did, and sort of brought him back up to speed by basically just showing him like the other Avenger movies and like what happened, basically like catching him up. I thought that was a pretty clever way in universe of doing that. And I like how retroactively we can see that the Loki from 2012 was never that crazy evil. Like, he was still Loki, who deep down is a good character. It's just that he has a lot of flaws that keep him from, you know, just being good. Early on, we see Loki questioning the TVA, which is the organization that sort of like keeps the multiverse timeline in check into like one main sacred timeline, which now, as the story is progressing, we're sort of starting to see that unravel and seeing that maybe, just maybe, the TVA is not necessarily the end all be all. It wasn't always there. So that means something happened before. Do you know what I mean? Obviously, with like the ominous, like, oh, timekeepers and all the statues and stuff, they very much seem like they're made up, or at least they're sort of being held to like this mythical, godlike level. And I feel like when we end up meeting them, they're not going to be that at all. I don't know. I don't know what to expect when we do see the timekeepers, or if we are even going to see the timekeepers, because Loki is one of the few Disney Plus Marvel shows that has a season 2 already greenlit. So who knows? Maybe we're not going to see them until season 3 if that ever happens. But this show, you never really know what to expect from episode to episode. Like, from episode 2 to episode 3, episode 2 ends on a cliffhanger where Loki follows Lady Loki when she escapes, and it's revealed that she sort of like time bombed a bunch of different timelines and messed up the whole time stream. And then episode 3, they never talk about that aspect of the story. I didn't even realize that until after like thinking about it. Like, they didn't even mention that huge thing that this lady version of Loki, like, I don't know if it's bad what she did, where she bombed the timeline and everything's gonna hit the red line, and if a timeline hits the red line, that means that that timeline gets destroyed or something. But I'm thinking maybe she's trying to prove that once a timeline hits the red line, that nothing happens, that the red line is made up, and that timeline just continues to be. I feel like I'm kind of going all over the place, but that's kind of what this show does to you, because there's just so much happening. That's what I love about this show, is that like right off the bat, we're 3 episodes in, and it feels like we've seen a pretty good chunk of like a movie, versus WandaVision, where 3 episodes in, nothing was really happening, and that was very frustrating because every single episode ended on a cliffhanger. It took a while for WandaVision to get going and get like really interesting, versus this one right off the bat. It's very visually stimulating, it's very colorful, I love it. It's very like Marvel cosmic, let's get ridiculous with this stuff. And then obviously just the concept itself is like so intriguing. This version of Loki is not supposed to exist. Sort of like that whole question of freedom and people being controlled, and what is the better option, because Loki's whole theme in like the Avengers, the first Avengers, was that he wanted people to be ruled because no one really wants to be free. And this whole entire show kind of revolves around the theme of free will and if anyone actually is able to make their own choices. Because if it's all one sacred timeline, if everything is meant to happen, then that means that everything is supposed to happen a specific way. So do we really have a choice in like what we do? Or because the timekeepers are trying to say that Loki was not supposed to do what he did. But if the Avengers were supposed to go back in time, that means that every single thing that happens with them was supposed to happen, which means that this Loki, he took the Tesseract as a result of the Avengers' action. So it's either the whole timekeeper, like everything must be the way it must be thing is BS, or this version of Loki was supposed to take the Tesseract. It's kind of mind-boggling stuff, and it kind of takes a while to get like your head wrapped around it. It's very easy to be like, what is happening with the timelines? And you really have to like sit back and be like, okay, wait, let me remember what happened in the other movie. And you really have to like think about this one. This is one for Marvel fans. Like if you're a newcomer, yeah, it is interesting, but you don't really get the full experience unless like you know the other movies, which I really love. It is very rewarding, and as these shows and these movies go on, it's like you have to know what's been going on. And I'm pretty sure for the majority, like most people know that Loki was a bad guy and like kind of turned good. Is this a mid-season review? I don't even know what it is. It's just me talking about like, oh, what did I think was cool? Lady Loki, I love what they're doing with that character, kind of showing a different side of like another what if Loki. It is very strange to me how they're sort of setting up this romance between Loki and his variant female self, but at the same time, me and my girlfriend were talking about it. It makes perfect sense for Loki to fall in love with himself, literally. So that does make sense for the character. Like it'd be weird if it was any other character like that fell in love with himself, but the fact that it's Loki is like, well, of course Loki, he's so full of himself. Like who else is he gonna like? The next few episodes are supposed to get like really crazy. Apparently, like the showrunners have said, like expect the unexpected. And I don't want to keep my hopes up too high, like well, with cameos and all that stuff, because you know the previous Disney Plus shows have showed us like, okay, like don't get your expectations too high because that could potentially mess up your actual experience with what is given to you. Owen Wilson, I love Owen Wilson in this show. He is a very fun part of it. I love his dynamic with Loki and how Loki's always like, oh, I'm so amazing, and he's very Loki. And then this guy is kind of just like whatever. Like it doesn't matter what you do. He's just very confident in what happens. He kind of knows Loki in and out. So it's going to be very interesting if there is a reveal that the TVA is all made up. It's a whole sham. How does he react to that? Because his whole purpose, he talks about it like his glorious purpose is the TVA. Like that's what he does, and as long as he believes in it, that's what it is. But if you take that away from him, I wonder what happens to him. I don't want to talk about like every single specific cool thing that has happened because this video would be like an hour long. But the one thing I want to talk about from episode 3, which just released, is how Loki, when a building falls, a building was falling on him and Lady Loki when like their planet was being destroyed. He literally reverses the building from destroying, and that one part alone made me stop and go like, what the frick just happened? Everything else like that Loki does, it's like, okay, that makes sense. But is that a power that he has? Like if you know, let me know in the comments. Is that a power that Loki has to reverse stuff? Because that seems like it would come in very handy. And I've seen like a theory or two that says like he took the time stone from the cabinet from episode 1. He took that and now he's able to use that because they're out of the TVA. So that stuff works. That would make sense, I guess, for him to be able to use the time stone to reverse stuff. But then you would think about, well, why didn't he use that before? So I don't know. That seems like a very overpowered thing to just reveal, like, oh yeah, I can reverse buildings from being destroyed. Guys, let me know your thoughts on the Loki show. What do you think about it so far? Do you like it? Is it underwhelming? Is it more than you expected? For me, it's about what I expected, with a little surprises here and there. So I really like the show. I can't wait for episode 4 next week. And yeah, I hope you guys have an amazing day. Subscribe, like if you haven't already. And yeah, I'll see you next time.